Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, we're going to build this. This is a vertical hydroponic system with 3D printable Jiffy pot holders that you can implement in small spaces within an urban environment. Incorporated in this design is a 3D printable Jiffy pot holder, which will be available on my Patreon. I'll also be making these prints available to those without 3D printers through a link in the description, but more about that at the end of the video. This is the family farm. This is the creek, this is the house, and this is the shed. This was actually my original inspiration to become more self-sufficient and live a little bit more rural. So as a thank you for setting me on the right path in finding my own property and lifestyle, I'm going to build my nan and pop a hydroponic system. Not just any hydroponic system, the first vertical hydroponic system that I've built, and I've designed a 3D print purely for this occasion. Okay, so I'm going to run you through a few of the things we'll be using today. I've got some 13mm irrigation tubing. I've got a pump. Now this is the AP 750 LV. The reason I've gone with the AP 750 LV is because, this might not be enough head. My experience with it is it has a really high head height, but it actually says it only has about 1.5 meters head, but that should be enough for our purposes today. 4mm tubing, some hydroponic nutrient. We have some black timber screws. This is for attaching the 3D prints to the pipe. Conduit clips that we're going to attach it's actually curtain rod that I'm using, but I would recommend steel if you're going to make this system. I've got the irrigation fittings we may need, a liquid pH test kit, some Jiffy peat pellets, zip ties, and a propagation dome. Now this is pretty much everything you're going to need to get started in hydroponics yet again. And I've got some seeds. You're also going to need your down pipes. So this is 50 by 100mm square down pipe. If you're in America, you can use the vinyl downspout they have there. I've got a 100-litre tote, and all up, everything except for the 3D prints costs $300. Okay, so first up, we're going to cut our PVC pipe in half. Now these are 3-meter length. I'm aiming for 1.5 meter lengths. We're going to have 3 lengths vertical and 1 length at the bottom, which is going to act as our catchment going into our tote. And on 3 of the lengths, I'm also going to drill out the holes for our 3D print. So for the 3D printable part of this system, I have designed these. These are 3D printable inserts that will go into the front of our rain gutter pipe and hold in place a 42mm or smaller Jiffy peat pellet once expanded. So this peat pellet will slip straight into the hole and be supported by the shelf on the back of our insert. You print this in one piece and it sits upright on the bed like so, and it has 3 holes that allow you to screw it in place and insert your plant. So I'm now just going to cut my gutter to size and drill out the holes on the pieces that require holes. Okay, so I'm now going to mark out our holes on our vertical pipes. Because I have 15 3D prints that I brought with me, I'm limited to 5 plantings per pipe. Now that's actually perfect because it divides the sections perfectly into 300mm spacing. So I'm going to start 150 in, and then every 30 centimeters I'll do a mark on the 2 outside rows, and then I'm going to stagger the center row. And now I'm going to drill them all out. And I guess I should probably introduce you. This is my dad. Okay, while Dad's finishing off the holes, we're going to add in the hooks for the supports for our vertical system. Okay, so the way that I've planned on hanging this system is by using the channel itself to hook over the top of our support system, which we'll build in a minute. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to drill a hole in each side at the top of our rail, and then we're going to cut diagonally downward so that we can hook the system over the top of a piece of pipe which we've got strung between two star pickets. So I'm going to put a hole in each side, and this hole just needs to be larger than the diameter of whatever you're using to support the system. And from here, we are going to move diagonally down backwards from whichever side your holes are on. And that will allow us to hook this system onto our poles. So to achieve this angle, I'm going to hit it with a 45-degree drop saw. I'm going to hit it with a 45-degree drop saw. Hold that.
No, it'll come up.
You reckon? Because that's just going to hit straight on there. Oh! Fuck that one.
One will just have to be a bit shorter, mate.
No, I've got an extra. That worked perfectly the first time though. I should have done that one first.
Yeah.
Because then they'd be held on both sides. Try again. So when you're cutting this, you're going to want to cut the exterior one first and then the interior one. Alright, let's do this again. I might even cut it a bit further down so you have a bit more on top. 50. And as you can see, we have the hook. Actually, if you really don't want to break it, just use a multi-tool. Thankfully, I can use this as the bottom gutter, use these three spacings as the places where I'm going to actually have these slide into, and I can make another one of these identical so that we don't have any inconsistencies. One more please, Dad. This is the other reason I'm here, to help Dad put his camper van electrics together. Okay, because our vertical hydroponic system is going to hang off a pole like this, I need to figure out how wide the pole is so that we can space out our pipes evenly. I'm going to mark out our holes, but I'm probably going to utilize the holes we've already got, which are probably almost perfectly spaced anyway. And it's going to make this system look really nice because these holes are spaced 300 millimeters apart and these holes are spaced 300 millimeters apart, which will give us a nice geometric pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to widen out these holes so that our pipes will slide down into them. And now I'm going to cut these out with a multi-tool. So I've got those cut out. Now, because I'm not 100% sure how this is going to fix to the system yet, I'm going to leave the ends. I will be heat bending them. One will go up and one will go down, and that will probably end up in our tote in the system. So now I'm going to install the 3D prints into the holes in the system that we've made. So on the print, we have 3 holes, and each of those holes I'm going to put in a black screw. Now, if you're worried about these rusting, put in stainless steel screws, but I couldn't find the size stainless steel screw that I wanted. So I'm just going with black countersunk timber screws. They've got a paint coating which should protect it. So all I'm going to do is screw them in like so. You can pre-drill these if you want to make sure that you get it in the perfect spot, but I don't think we'll need to. And as you can see, the way that I've designed the print, it provides a lip on the back so the water doesn't spill out and over the front of the 3D print. I'm using that. Can I have it back? Yeah. So I'm just going to go and install the rest of my 3D prints. Now all our pipes are set up and ready to go, we can assemble the system in place. And this is where we're going to set up the hydroponic system. Now we're using this area because it is north facing. It's got a really good aspect and it's close to the kitchen, so Nan can come out and pick her herbs and lettuce and other greens. This is Nan.
Oh, well, Nan didn't do it. To get for an old lady, it has to be accessible.
Yep, I'll put that in. For the supports for this hydroponic system, I'll be using 2400mm posts and we'll be hitting them into the ground to hold up our system. We probably don't even need to hit them into the ground because it's been raining so much around here and I can just push them in. So I'm going to work out the height that this system needs to be by placing the tote under the system and checking the height against our vertical rails. This is Pop. Trying to get it exactly there. I'm now just going to use this conduit mounting saddle to mount our top rail. I might get you giving a hand, Pop. It's tough steel. I didn't realise how thick this steel would be though. Might need a drill bit. Oh, I've got a better idea. If I just screw straight through the holes and into the actual pole. Let's try that. Oh, that's perfect. So no saddles. We just need to drill into the rod itself. Oh, stop it. So our system's looking good. Now we just need to figure out how much slant we want on the system. So we want the nutrient to fall to the back of the pipes because these holders actually hold the Jiffy peat pellet to the back of the system, and that's going to allow us to keep the pellets moist while the roots haven't traveled down the back of this pipe. So I'm going to introduce another metal bar and we're going to raise it to the point where we can get the water to travel down the back of the pipe, about there, and that will give us a nice slope forward on the system. So I've had a change of plan. I was going to have this pipe mounted underneath the system, catching all of the nutrients and having it run into our res, which will be beside it. But because the system is self-supporting, I'm actually not worried about having the system run directly into the res, because we can have the res placed underneath the system and have the system running down into it and still have the ability to pull the res out and change it and push it back under. And we can have the lid so that it's able to flip up even with the system in place. So that's the way that the system's evolved as I've set it up. I've decided to get away from having the extra complexity in the bottom pipe. This bottom pipe setup would be perfect for if you're running a whole wall of vertical pipes, which I will be in the future at home. But for now, because we've only got the 3 pipes and they only take up the surface area of the tote that we're using, we're just going to have it run directly back into the tote. So we're now going to run our plumbing. So we're going to come up one of the sides of the star pickets and we're going to run it across back behind on this bar. So we can zip tie the poly pipe up to this bar and it actually slips in behind our vertical pipes. So at the top here, we're going to put in an elbow so that our poly pipe will follow along the back of our support here. And we can run a piece of poly pipe along behind this support. And at the end here, we're going to double it over like that and we'll throw a zip tie around it. I'll double it backwards actually, like that. Now we can just make sure that our system fits over it nicely, and there it is. So we'll place our system where we want it to go, and in the places that we want our irrigation line coming out, we're going to poke holes in the irrigation line and we're going to place in our 4mm barbs. 1, 2, 3. We're now going to mark out and cut out the top of this tote so that...
Mate, you're going to have a beer.
Oh, good. So now we're going to mark out and cut out the holes for these pipes. And I've positioned the res just high enough so that these pipes slot into it and somewhat steadied by the bottom res lid. If you wanted this to hold these in place tighter, you could just lift or lower the res to your liking. This should actually allow us to do res checks by just lifting up our lid like so, and you can do your pH adjustment and everything without having to move the reservoir at all. So now we're going to add in the pump. I'm just going to drill a hole with a hole saw at the back for our irrigation line to run to our pump. Then we can connect up our pump and place it into the bottom of our reservoir. And we can run our cord up and out the same hole. The system's assembled and ready to be turned on. Now it's time to fill up the res and we'll see how the system runs. Now, depending on how this test goes, I may have one more thing to add to make sure that all of your peat pellets are always in contact with water. The reservoir is full now and the sides are bowing, but that's fine because once the lid's on, it just holds the sides in like so, and we can try out the pump. So I'll turn the pump on and we'll see what happens. There we go. So that's running and you can see the water's coming down and it's actually dripping directly on top of all of our plants. I knew I should have siliconed these. So you can see here where our nutrients coming out the front. So if I had put silicone around these, that wouldn't be happening. And I did think about doing that. I have got a backup plan for this. I'll show you what's happening here. So our 4mm barb is feeding onto the front of each of these systems and it's dripping down the front over all of our Jiffy peat pellets once we have them installed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to set this system up with cotton bandage so that you have a wicking material which will allow the water to stream down without any of this leakage on the front. So here we have bulldog clips. Now these are going to hold on to our system some cotton bandage. Now this is going to give our system a medium for the water to trickle down behind our peat pellets and will stop this dribbling and dripping out of the water in the system, because it won't be falling and splashing, it will just be trickling down the back of a cotton bandage. So not everything goes to plan. I've added in our cotton bandage and it seems to be working really well. It's stopped most of the splashing, but there is still a little bit of water coming out the front from between the 3D print and our PVC pipe. So what's going to happen here is we are going to have to silicone in our 3D printable pieces. So I'm going to have to take it apart, dry it, and silicone them in. I thought I'd get away with it because I had that overlap, but it is running out in between those pieces. But that won't be a problem once I've siliconed it in. And fortunately, I was worried that perhaps the water would only stick to one side of the channel and it wouldn't provide enough to the plants, but I'm extremely happy with how wet all of these placements are. I'm extremely satisfied that this would definitely provide enough water to the plants in the system. We just need to stop the leaking around the edges of these prints, and we can do that with the silicone. You want to do that? They might actually, oh, they fit perfectly in front of the system like that. So we can just leave them like that, and then you can have them starting there as the other ones grow. It's the next day and the silicon's dry on our 3D printable fixtures. So let's turn on the system and have a look at how it performs now that we've got all those gaps sealed. So this is performing way better. So as you can see, the bandage actually allows the flow of nutrients to travel down the back of our Jiffy peat pellets, whereas the ones on the outside are actually still suffering from a little bit of splashing out while there's no peat pellets in the system. But once you have peat pellets in this system, each peat pellet will be wet at the top and the water will fall down onto the next peat pellet, as is the design of the holder within the system. And the bandage within the system is doing its job perfectly. It's allowing the water to travel down the back of our Jiffy peat pellets, and it is still delivering that nutrient to each pellet without all of the chaotic splashing that is happening on the outside systems. So I'm going to add the rest of the bandage to our system, and I'm going to add in some test Jiffy peat pellets so that we can see how the system looks and runs with pellets in place. And at the top here, because we've got our bandage attached at the front, the irrigation line shoots the water onto the bandage and it travels down the back of our vertical channel. So these are the Jiffy peat pellets that are readily available from your hardware store. Now, you can use these, but if you want to close that hole in the system as much as possible, these are the 42mm versions. Now, I think they're 35 and these are 42. So I've brought these with me. I got 1,000 for 170 or 180 bucks. And that brings them down to about 18 cents a piece. These are also cocoa rather than peat, which means that they're a renewable resource. And the outside layer on the peat ones is a plastic, which is not biodegradable, and the outside layer on the cocoa is a paper. That is also something to take into consideration when you're purchasing these. I'm going to fill up the system with these 42mm cocoa pellets, and we'll run it and see how the system looks fully laden. Quickly mix up this nutrient. I'll move our propagation tray. We did the propagation last night. I did that with Nan, and we can test our water with our pH test kit. Oh, that's what I want to see. That is dark. That is 7. 7 or 6.5. That is perfect. So we can add our nutrient into that and see what our nutrient does to our water. This nutrient comes with a measuring spoon, and we want to dissolve 120 grams in 100 litres of water of part 1 and 80 grams in 100 litres of water part 2. So we've got exactly 100 litres of water here, so we can follow this recipe exactly, except for the fact that we want to halve that because we're only growing leafy greens and this is a full strength application. So we are going to do half the amount, so 60 grams of part 1 and 40 grams of part 2. We've got a 5-gram spoon, so we don't even need to weigh it, and I'm going to mix it into hot water. So I'll grab some hot water. So part 1, 60, so I need 12. 12. Part 2, I need 40. Right. Now I just mix those up so they're fully dissolved. Packs back, and we can add these in. So I'm going to add the calcium nitrate part 2 first, and we'll just mix it around, and then we're going to add in our part 1, which is just all the other elements, like so. Now this should bring us to an EC of about 1 to 1.2, but I don't have an EC reader on me, so we won't know that, but the instructions should give us an idea of how much to add. Now we can test the pH. Now remember, our pH was about 7, and added our nutrient, and I'm hoping that brings us to about 6 to 6.5. So, oh, look at that. That is actually even more perfect. 5.5 to 6. So that nutrient works absolutely perfectly with this water. I'm not even going to need to adjust this nutrient. That will make it a lot easier for my grandparents to mix up this nutrient without having to worry about balancing their pH. Pretty stoked. Actually, what I was meaning to do, which we didn't get from the hardware store, you don't lift those off with the plants on it, you just leave them on. You can just lift this up, right?
But I can't empty it.
No, but when you empty it the first time, drill a hole in the side
And put a tap in
put
it.
a tap in it.
Yeah, right.
And then you can just open the tap,
Okay, so
drain it
the
out.
first time I pull it out, drag it out, and
You don't have to the first time. If you wanted to, turn the pump on
and just empty it out.
and empty it out. I've got all the 42mm peat pellets rehydrated. Let's run the system a final time with nutrient in and see if we have any leaks. Okay, so it's a bit of a mess. I would definitely do this in shallower water than this, but we'll add this into our system now. And as you can see, it perfectly fits the 42mm cocoa peat pellets, cocoa pellets. And they fit in and sit flush with the back of the wall on the bandage. So that will allow them to wick forward and supply the plants nutrients. Okay, one last time, why not? So there it is. We've got the nutrient in the system and all the cocoa is being wet without any spillage whatsoever. I'm really happy with that. That is running. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm pretty bloody stoked with this system. It is running now. It is completely quiet, except for, I'll try and get the noise of the pump. You can hear it humming because it's against the side of the container. But there's no splashing sounds. There's the occasional dripping sound, but that's from the system dripping onto the Jiffy peat pellets. And there is no water escaping this system whatsoever. I'm really, really stoked with how this turned out. And it's been a great test system for the expansion that I want to do at home with this style of system. Just before we finish up, I want to give you a quick update on how our small space NFT hydroponic system that we built for Danny and his veranda is going. And he's been getting a steady supply of lettuce from that system. As you can see, it is absolutely thriving. We built this system for about $250 and it is well on the way to paying itself off. One of my mates saw iceberg lettuce the other day in the supermarket for $4.50 a head, which is ridiculously expensive. And if you eat lettuce regularly, this system will pay itself off within months. Now, the 3D printable Jiffy pot holders for this vertical hydroponic system I will be making available in a link in the description to a place where you can purchase 10 packs of them, and eventually I'll expand that store to include different varieties of prints. They are going to be released in a limited fashion to begin with until such time as I get a production capacity to keep up with whatever demand there is for them. So if they have run out by the time you get there, don't fear. I will be looking at expanding the capacity for my printing if that is something that people are interested in. It will always be cheaper to print your own, however, and I'm encouraging that by keeping the price slightly higher because I don't want it to take up all of my time, as well as the fact that I think that decentralized manufacturing is the future, and I would like to see expenditure of fossil fuels in the transportation of stuff when you could print it at home or find a library with a 3D printer or a makerspace. So I'd highly recommend that if you do not have a 3D printer, that the link in the description is the last place that you go, but I want to make it available to those that just do not have a 3D printer available to them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos. All of the 3D print files that you've seen here and on my channel are available through my Patreon. Happy hydroponicking, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos.